Good morning. It's Jeffrey Christian of CPM Group. It's about 10:55 in the morning on Tuesday, the 15th of August here in New York. I wanted to continue the discussion from last Friday's video. Last Friday, I talked about silver supply and demand a little bit. And actually, one of the questions in the comments had to do with Comex inventories. And I wanted to go over that, plow those old fields. So I'll talk a little bit about inventories, not only at the Comex, but in London and Shanghai, and then a little bit about fabrication demand. One of the topics that I talked about last week was the fact that CPM Group's data, which is based on classic commodities research, we're not marketing people, we're not promoters. We try to get our research right so that we can get our price projections right. And we look at total supply less fabrication demand equals a surplus or a deficit. And if there's a surplus and investors want that much silver or more, they will drive the price higher. And if they don't want that much silver, they will not buy all that silver, and the excess inventories will cause prices to decline. And similarly, if there's a deficit, and investors are disenchanted with silver as they were in the 90s into 2004, 2005, they will sell their silver and allow that silver to be bought by fabricators to compensate for the deficit. And it's in contrast to some of the numbers you see elsewhere. And yes, we have a surplus. It's about 70 million ounces this year. And investors have been buying most of it, but not necessarily all of it. We've seen about a 12% decline in silver ETF holdings. We've seen some weakness in silver coin demand. We've seen resales of bullion medallions and bars in the first 7.5 months of the year. And that's being reflected in the price. The price of silver is around $22.51 as I speak. Hasn't gotten to 100 or 1,000 or anything else, and it's probably not going to this year. But these are the surplus and deficits in the real silver market as measured properly, total supply less fabrication demand. We also talked a little bit about the relationship between open interest on the Comex and silver prices because there were various promoters talking about how open interest had been rising over the last few weeks, and that was a sign of higher prices. And we pointed out that typically when open interest rises on the Comex, silver prices fall. Not always, but there's some pretty strong examples of that. So we went through all that stuff, and one of the comments was, well, how do you explain the decline from like 300 million ounces of Comex inventories to 30 million ounces? Well, first off, we explain it by pointing out that the 300 million ounces was actually total Comex reported inventories, not just the registered stocks, but also the stocks held in Comex registered depositories that met the Comex specs, 1,000-ounce bars. Coins are excluded in what the Comex reports, and as are smaller bars. You have to be good deliverable Comex material to show up as eligible stocks. The 300 was total registered and eligible, and the 30 is registered only. So the first part of the explaining that decline is to say that you're looking at two separate sets of data. But let's look at the two sets of data separately. Registered inventories did get up to about 150 million ounces or 150 million ounces in 2021. And it's very interesting because people who want to believe in silver say, why did the silver inventories fall from 150 million ounces to 30, 33, 31 million ounces? They never say, hey, let's look at this chart. Inventories were about below 30 million ounces in 2016, and they rode from 2016 up into that peak in late the late 2020, early 2021. They never say, how is it that inventories have fallen back to more typical levels? Because that explains the decline. The inventories rose 2016, 17, 18 because you had very low demand. You can see right here, this decline here, 40 million ounces. You had low demand. You had metal building up in inventories. They started to rise as investors were disgorging silver, and even as the price was rising. And then investors started buying, and some of that metal was showing up on the Comex. Then you had the pandemic. The world locked down. No one was making stuff. Factories were closed. And the inventory shot up from, I think, around 80 million ounces to 120, 130 million ounces. So part of the explanation for the decline is the explanation for the increase. The increase into late 2020 was to abnormally high levels, fed and fueled by the pandemic and the economic lockdown. The decline after January of 2021 was part and parcel reflecting the increased demand for metal as the global economy and the U.S. economy came out of the economic lockdown. It's really kind of simple, right? Now, this chart is from our Silver Yearbook. We released it in May. It only goes through May 1st, 2023. So I put the data over on the side as to why I didn't bother to update this chart. On May 1st, there was 33 million ounces of registered stocks, and there's 31 million ounces as of last Friday, the most recent data published by the Comex. So it's hardly changed. We're back to normal levels of registered inventories because the silver market's back to normal operating levels. In terms of total inventories, which are not just the registered but also the eligible, we saw 238 million ounces in May, and it's actually up about 11 million ounces to 249 million ounces now. Doesn't show up here because this chart only goes through May. But you can see there that the inventories also rose typical total Comex reported inventories were 120 million ounces. This chart goes back to 2003 to 2011. Inventories were 120 million ounces. They started to rise earlier than registered stocks, but they rose from 2011 moving forward. And then after 2016, they rose very sharply. And during the lockdown, they shot up to more than 400 million ounces in total. Okay? Since the lockdown, they've come back down to 250 million ounces, which is abnormally high amount of silver from a historical perspective. And it's one of the reasons why I said, look, if you want to believe these promoters who say there's no silver left and we're running out of silver and you better watch out because you're not going to be able to buy silver after next Tuesday, except from me. I made the offer. I said, look, if you actually believe that the world's running out of silver, give me your money and I will buy you as much silver as you want. I'm confident I can buy 100 million ounces of silver and keep the price below $28. There's plenty of silver around, and there's really, if you want, to be honest, record amounts of silver in Comex registered depositories. So empirical evidence that flies in the face of some people's beliefs and rhetoric. London inventories, they only started reporting in 2016. They rose through the lockdown. They've come off since then. We've written and talked about how about 100 million ounces of that silver went off to Mumbai and to Indian markets. And then about 70% of that silver actually was sold into other Asian markets. There are some conspiracy theorist guys who say that most of that actually went into China. But actually, a lot of it went into Thailand and other countries in Southeast Asia, where the silver is used in manufacturing semiconductors, other electronic parts, parts that go into automobiles and other electronic goods. And then some of the silver probably went into China, because China is one of the major producers of silver, of solar panels, which use silver, and they import silver powder. But the silver, generally speaking, if I remember correctly, is converted into silver powders before it's imported into China. And that happens because the Chinese government says, given the enormous amounts of silver that we have built up in inventories across China, we really ought not to be importing more silver bullion. So the solar panel manufacturers tend to convert the bullion into powder overseas and then import the powders. Comex London inventories rising a little bit more. I should point out, because some people don't realize, in Comex inventory reports, they only report that which is good delivery. So in silver, 1,000-ounce bars, gold, 100-ounce bars, or they'll take bundles of 3-kilo bars. In London, they report all of the silver and all of the gold in LBMA registered depositories within the Greater London market area. So if you've got kilo bars, or if you've got coins or other forms other than 1,000-ounce bars, it shows up in the London inventories. And I believe last week or the week before, I did mention that there are non-registered LBMA depositories just outside of the zone that the LBMA has for its depositories. And there is metal that is stored in those non-LBMA depositories. But this is what you can see. And this is what you can see in Shanghai. These are Shanghai future exchange reported inventories. And you can see, generally speaking, they've been rising since they started futures trading in 2012, 2013. They're down from their peak during the lockdown, but they're still pretty high. So that's the story for silver inventories. Going on now a little bit, I want to show you a couple charts on silver use in solar panels. Most of the stuff that I was just telling you about inventories, we've covered over and over again, but I guess it's good to repeat because people forget what they heard. So it's good to repeat. And this is actually, frankly, information that we've talked about too. We had similar charts in the Silver Yearbook. This was actually taken out of the August Precious Metals Advisory, which is our monthly precious metals report that we produce. We update these charts and on a monthly basis. We look at the data to see if there's new changes in supply and demand, including our projections. This is solar panels, silver use in solar panels. We had a big increase last year. We're looking for a smaller increase, but an increase again this year. And we are seeing this long-term trend persisting. So solar panels continue to be in use. They're using more than 120 million ounces of silver a year. That makes them one of the larger uses these days. Not as much as jewelry and silverware, but then jewelry and silverware is an amalgamation of all sorts of markets for silver, either in jewelry or silverware form. And then the last chart I have really is silver use in automobiles. Slow but steady increase ever since the economic lockdown. We're still not back to those pre-pandemic levels that we saw in 2018. We're about the same as what we were in 2017. The auto industry has been slow to recover. We had the semiconductor shortages. We had other supply shortages. We've had a shift in the demographics of automotive demand in many parts of the world. And you have other changes in the automotive industry. We do expect silver use in the auto industry to continue to grow. It's not going to grow in leaps and bounds the way some of the promoters would have you believe, but we do see a bright future for silver use in automobiles. The Silver Yearbook, from which these charts have been taken, you can buy it online and download it as an ebook for $160. So for the price of a few ounces of silver, you can really educate yourself on the silver market and get away from all of the promotional stuff that you get for free on the internet. And you know, free research is worth every penny you pay for it. You can go to our website, you can get some free research. We do put it out as a marketing of our research. We don't sell precious metals. We sell research and consulting services aimed at helping investors, miners, refiners, smelters, fabricators, governments, central banks, mints, brokers, institutional investors of all sorts to do better in their precious metals and commodity management work. That's all I have for now. I will put this hat on. My good old friend Rob from high school sent it to me, and I said, do good. And he said, yes, you always end your presentation saying take care of yourself and those around you and try to do something good for the world. And so he sent me this hat. Rob's one of those guys who I should always have taken his advice every time he offered it to me, because he is wise beyond what many people realize. He's a really smart guy and a very moral and ethical fellow. And I thank him for this hat. I won't wear it in future episodes, I don't think, but I'll find uses for it sometime. Thank you.